Hello and welcome to ITRA Trail Talks. I'm your host, Jeff Campbell, and in today's episode, we're talking about a topic that's near and dear to my aging heart, running and aging. And we have two really amazing guests. We have with us from San Antonio, Texas. She is a multiple-time winner of Leadville 100 and the Rocky Raccoon 100. She's represented Team USA at the 100K World Championships. Welcome, Liza Howard. And then we also have with us Dean Karnazes. He's an award-winning endurance athlete, an entrepreneur, an author, author of Ultramarathon Man and A Runner's High and some other great books. Coming from California. Dean, how old are you today?
I'm a bit older than 52. I've actually crested 60, so yeah.
Okay, into that new age category. So today's topic is about running and aging, and we have two quite competitive athletes who've won a lot of overalls and are maybe sort of in some of the age group categories these days. But I want to hear a little bit about how each of you got into the sport of running, because we'll start with Dean. I understand that you got started right as a young kid. How did you get into the sport?
Yeah, I mean, my earliest childhood recollection is running home from kindergarten. So I started running when I was 5 years old. I ran competitively until I was in high school, and we won the cross-country championships, and I thought that's as far as I'll ever take my running career. Fast forward to my 30th birthday in a bar in San Francisco with my buddies, doing what a lot of people do on their 30th birthday. I was, in there drinking tequila, and they said, let's have another round of tequila. And I told them I was leaving, and they said, it's midnight, the night is young. And I said, I'm gonna run 30 miles to celebrate my 30th birthday instead of drinking any more tequila. So I literally walked out of this bar. I didn't even own running gear at the time, but I had on these comfortable silk boxer shorts, like this silk underwear. And I'll never forget, I threw my pants down the alleyway and started stumbling into the night heading south, knowing a town called Half Moon Bay was 30 miles away. And somehow I made it. I wouldn't call it running what I did. I would call it, crawling, hobbling, shuffling. But I got to Half Moon Bay and decided I was going to quit my corporate job and become an ultramarathoner. And that was, 3 decades ago.
Okay, so a little bit of sort of competitive sharp speed stuff when you were young, and then literally stumbled your way into the ultra distance and fell in love with it. Lisa, how about yourself? When did you get into the sport, especially at a competitive sort of level?
I moved to San Antonio. My husband was running the outdoor program here at the university, and I had been working in the outdoor industry for Knowles and Outward Bound, leading mountaineering trips. And we came to San Antonio, and there are no mountains here, and not a big mountaineering community. And so I was kind of at loose ends, and I fell in with the trail running community here, which was really tiny at the time. It's much bigger now. Yeah. And it was just peer pressure. They were like, hey, we're going to do a 50K. And I was like, I don't even know how that far that is. That sounds fun. And so I did that. And they were like, we're doing a 50 miler. And I was like, well, I know how far that is. Sounds good. And then we did 100K and 100 milers, and never looked back. So if they'd been like doing drugs, I probably would have fallen into that. Like it was peer pressure entirely. So, yeah. And it turned out I was okay, which was great. So I had really young kids and wasn't working in the field that I loved anymore, and was at loose ends, and then fell in with this community, and they were just wonderful. And then it turned out I had a facility for like going forward. And so that was pretty wonderful to get that kind of affirmation. And then, kept going.
So each of you have run at sort of the highest levels of the sport, have won some big races, competitive against the entire field. At what point in your running journey did you start feeling like an aging runner, or starting to feel sort of the accumulated mileage kind of come out? At what stage did that sort of did the first signs of that transition start for you?
You know, I got into the sport relatively late. I mean, I started at 30, and I really didn't get competitive and really take the sport seriously until I was in my, early to mid 40s. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, I won the Badwater Ultramarathon. I think I was 43 or 44. I mean, I started accumulating like multiple finishes just because I love the sport and I love the adventure of it. I remember finishing my 10th Western States and then my 10th Badwater, and now I think I'm up to 14 Western States. And the last competitive race I won was actually in 2009. It was the Four Deserts Challenge, and it felt great to be on the podium, on the overall podium, winning that outright, because that's a pretty grueling race. But it really hurt. It took a lot out of me, and to win that, and I realized that the guy who was chasing me, Ryan Sands, who is 15 years my younger companion, I realized that, this is the future and you got to live with it. So yeah, I win age division races all the time, but I think the only people that care who's winning the age division race is the person in those age divisions. But I still love the sport. I still love doing it. Yeah.
And Liza, how about yourself? When did you start to sort of feel as more of a runner,
Old
sort of
and old and rickety.
as opposed to just sort of being right in the middle of the prime?
Well, I mean, I didn't start really running until I was 35 in ultra running, and so, and I'm still able to win races. And so, but as far as like feeling older and, having to change training because of that, it's hard, right? Because you feel so tired all the time with young kids. So it's like hard to tease apart like what's age and what's just life. But I would say kind of like the first like kind of slap in the face as far as like, oh, you're an older runner, is honestly race photos where you're like, well, I didn't realize that skin could get loose like that. Like, like, that looks like an old person. I guess that's, and so I think initially it was more like outward signs, like hair graying and, wrinkles, or like the race photos where you're like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And I think that, and I recognize that when, like, for me, for many people, 50 is ancient, right? Like for my children, 50 seems ancient, and their friends, and for 20-year-olds, it seems ancient. But when you're 55 or 60 or 70 or 80, you're like, I don't even want to hear what you have to say, because that's not old. And so I recognize that for sure. But I would say, like, I've had to start to really change my training in the last 3 years and add in a lot more. Like, all the things that I knew that I should be doing, like, I actually have to do them now in order to kind of perform the way I'd like to perform. Right?
Okay,
like, I didn't have to stretch. I knew I should.
Yeah. So that's really interesting. So was that because recovery was taking longer, injuries, or just to maintain the same level of performance that you were used to at that point?
Mostly to maintain the same level of performance. I mean, for sure, like I'd be more sore, right, or more tired. And so a little bit like changing the amount of recovery and timing things, but more like, oh, like if I want to run fast, like I have to do speed work. I can't just like count on like having a good run and like going a little faster, or and for the power, like it seems like I have to do some weight work and lift heavy things, not just because it's fun or to look a certain way, like to actually push off harder and do mobility work. Like if I don't do that, like I can't bend down and tie my shoes as easily, but if I do all that stuff, then I can. And I think it's just this decision of like, do you want that? It seems like a lot of people make like, do I want to do these extra hours in order to do this thing that I've been able to do without them? And it seems like that takes a lot of people out of the sport. Like it's not a priority. Like I don't want to spend 3 hours of my week stretching or doing mobility work or weights.
Yeah. And so earlier in your career, you mostly just threw mileage at the training and did more racing, and now it's more structured. Like what does a solid sort of training week look like for you now?
So I feel really strange sharing this with Dean. I'm like, so Dean, let me tell you about my training. But anyway, yeah, so like this morning I got up and I did 10 minutes of mobility work right off the bat. And I do these, like, I do this squat, so I have hip mobility. And then I do this little, 10 more minutes of mobility work. And then I go out and I did my run today, and I have like 3 speed workouts that I do a week that are very structured. And then, like I do weights 6 times a week, and today I like did my little arms. But yeah, so I never lifted legs. I was always kind of like, well, I run up hills and I'm running, my legs are fine. And so now actually doing that kind of stuff, but that was yesterday. And then sleeping, like, making sure that I actually get 7 or 8 hours of sleep. Like I can't do this stuff if I don't.
Yeah. That's interesting. And Dean, how about yourself? How has your training regime sort of changed as you've been going through the age categories, and what does a week look like for you these days?
Yeah, I mean, I can completely relate to what Liza said. I mean, recovery takes longer. I can't handle the volume I used to handle. I mean, I used to, do 150-mile weeks without a problem. I used to do back to 100-milers each weekend. That was 15 years ago, 20 years ago, now it's kind of in vogue to do all these back-to-back races, but I used to do that all the time with really no consequences. But, now the volume has come way down. The intensity's gone way up. So I'm doing these shorter, like 5-mile tempo runs at max heart rate, breathing only through my nose. So it's kind of forced hypoxia. And just pushing as hard as I can, and only nose breathing. So it's horrible, and you're not going very fast, and so I'm getting my heart rate up to 200, which, for a guy my age is pretty high. And I'm not doing a lot of, structural damage. I'm really not going that. I'm just kind of shuffling, because I'm breathing through my nose and restricting airflow. But it's really helped as far as like maintaining my leg speed, is doing that sort of thing. I'm also cross-training with something called an elliptigo, which is a stand-up bike. And I'm not I don't like going to the gym. I have I do weight, cross-training with weights, but I have a home gym. So I ride this elliptigo, and it's very aerodynamically inefficient. You're standing erect, and so you can't go that fast. But it is more like a running motion than riding a traditional bike, because I used to mountain bike a lot.
This isn't a stationary bike. This is a bike that takes you somewhere.
Yeah, it's a great outdoor experience. I have both a mountain elliptigo and a road elliptigo, so I'm on the trails, and there's zero impact, but I'm still getting really good cardio, and I'm getting some leg fitness, but it's not running, but I still get the runner's high. It's the only device outside of running that really gave me the runner's high. So I'm doing a lot of cross training on that, just to try to preserve, my joints and my bone structure and everything like that, so forth.
And speaking of joints, I mean, I think all runners, we'll get questions from some. How are your knees feeling? I used to run, but too much pain in some of my joints. As older runners, or as you've gotten older as a runner yourself, have you noticed more injuries? Have either of you changed anything in terms of how you manage niggles that come up?
I think that I've had fewer injuries, and I think that's just more experience, right? Like just having run for a long time, when to back off. So I don't think that. So I'm not saying that getting older prevents injuries, though that would be awesome. But more just that, like you recognize, like, oh, this is coming up. When this happened before, like this was my experience, so I'm going to back off now. I think that you're just better at that, and you've like got this huge, grouping of things to try to deal with that injury, right? Like, so you've got this quiver full of like, well, I know these PT exercises, I can try this, and so you just learned a lot. You're an expert at what you do by this time.
Okay, yeah. How about yourself, Dean? Injuries?
I mean, knock on wood, I haven't had a running related injury in my whole career, so I've lost toenails like we all have, but I still haven't suffered an injury. But I think to Liza's point, I've learned to run smarter. I kind of know where the edge is, and I try to bump right up to it, but I don't go over it. I push as hard as I can, but I feel like now if I push a little bit harder, I might injure myself. So I'm kind of avoiding that, and also learning, the cross training that really helps, make you feel better, because you certainly, after a race, like I ran a marathon 2 weekends ago, and it was hot. It was a tough marathon, and I still feel it. And it's almost 10 days later, and I used to be able to run marathons, back to back without problems. So it's just a slower recovery, and you just need to be more patient and do a lot more cross training. To Liza's point again.
I do think, like, with the athletes that I work with that in their later 60s and 70s, it seems like being afraid of falling, like feeling more tentative on more technical terrain. And that, yeah, when you do fall, it seems like that obviously the recovery is longer from that, and maybe the injuries are more substantial than, if you're in your 20s. It seems like, so it seems like fewer, as far as the folks that I've worked with, overuse type injuries, that common stuff, and more kind of traumatic type injuries with falls.
I so agree, because I was at Leadville this year just crewing for someone, but we did a lot of training runs, and I've run Leadville a few times, and I've run the Trans Rockies, and I just remember just flying down the backside of Hope Pass, and I mean now I've got poles,
yeah, exactly,
and I'm watching every step. I mean, when I get on a graded fire road, it's fine, I can open it up, but when it's technical, my legs are just not as springy, and my reactions are not nearly as quick as they used to be. And, it's a little frustrating in that regard, especially when younger people pass you and you remember, how much of a dance it was with the trail when you could just let it out. But those days are over unless it's a graded fire road.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And sometimes I see some of the young guns flying down the technical stuff, and I think I have a family to take care of, and an office to get to tomorrow. So I mean, Dean, you just talked on sort of some of the things that you might have lost sort of over the years, maybe some of that fearlessness on the super technical stuff, or the quick reactions. Do you think there's anything that you've gained over the years as a runner, sort of to offset maybe some of the physical changes, just in terms of actual physical endurance, in terms of mental, psychological?
One thing I've noticed, I need more sleep just day to day, but I'm also better at dealing with sleep deprivation. Like I can do multi-day runs and be up for 2 or 3 days with no sleep, and I don't even feel it. Where before, I remember just getting so groggy, but now I can deal with the sleep deprivation. I still need more sleep to recover, and just day to day, I'm sleeping more. But I have noticed that that's one advantage. I don't need to sleep the way I used to when I'm doing a race.
And do you think that's a physical change, or do you think that that's something that you've sort of trained yourself to deal with the night terrors and the sleep deprivation?
I don't know. That's a good question. And I've heard that as you get older, you need less sleep. But day to day, I still try to get 7 to 8 hours just on a daily basis. But I don't know why I can just go through night after night without sleep. I mean, when I did the Atacama Crossing race, which is 6 days self-supported, 250-mile stage race. I just remember not sleeping at all. I mean, every single night I didn't sleep, and my tent mate was snoring, which didn't help. But I just seemed like I could not sleep, and I didn't suffer any ill effects from it, which is bizarre to go for a whole week without sleeping and still look kind of normal, not like a zombie.
Liza, how about yourself? Anything that sort of you've sort of improved on over the years? Any sort of tricks or adaptations?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, kind of like we were saying, like you get better at doing certain things. Like I know how to, keep myself cool better, and so for real hot races, like I can do that. And perhaps I don't deal with the heat quite as well, but it's okay because I've learned, how to manage it better. So there's that. But I think like a big part of it is that, you know, but that you really kind of dial down on why you're doing it, I think more. Like if you're going to spend this kind of time and do these additional things in order to, kind of do these races and things like this, and it takes up so much time that you really understand why it's valuable to you more. Like, it just kind of boils away all of the excess of like, oh, I'm doing it for attention or to look a certain way or whatever. And it's like, oh no, I always said it was for the community and it was for how it made me feel. And like, is that true? Yeah, that is true. And so it kind of forces you to, kind of walk the walk of your talk. I know that's not how you say it. You know what I mean?
It's a little bit off the main topic, but as a Hong Kong-based trail runner, I'm curious if you have any tips for how you deal with the heat.
Well, I mean, Dean can speak to this as well. I think that so I have not run Badwater as many times as Dean has, but
you're smarter than Dean is. That's the reason.
I'm running it next year though, so I don't know. So I think that I think a large part of it is dealing with all the external cues of how miserable the environment is, like that impact. Like heat exhaustion is also psychological, right? Like your perception of how miserable you are in that particular environment. So doing things like the darker sunglasses and shading yourself and getting the sun off your skin, like all those things actually do have quite an impact on your performance. And then the power of ice early, is just amazing. And so figuring out like how you want to carry that ice on your person that you're actually gonna do, I think has been real helpful. And I got to run this race just recently where the only reason I did well was because I could do all that stuff and other folks hadn't practiced it or just didn't feel like it was necessary, where I was like, no, I'm delicate, I need to do all these things.
Dean, same for you. I mean, yeah, you've run a lot in the heat.
Well, I mean, Hong Kong, the humidity is a big factor when you're dealing with heat, and certainly I have a heck of a lot of respect for anyone who's running in humidity because it's tougher to cool yourself down. But I think to Liza's point, I've learned to keep the sun off of me. So I work with a hat company called Sunday Afternoons, and they make this brimmed hat that's really breathable. Liza, I need to get you one for Badwater. It's the ultimate Badwater hat. So it keeps the sun off of you, but it still lets air flow. They make arm sleeves as well. So I put on cooling arm sleeves with ice pockets early on. I wear longer inseam shorts just to keep the sun off my skin. I've really noticed that, especially as I'm getting older, sun hitting my skin really zaps my energy, and it zaps anyone's energy. But I think that having eyewear on, just kind of feeling like you're in your own private Idaho in a little cooling station as you're running makes a big difference. And especially in the longer races, and to Liza's point, I've been able to place fairly well in hot races just because I know how to conserve myself when it gets hot.
Yeah, and it's not hot like in San Antonio or humid in San Antonio like it is there, but it's miserable enough. And I think that like there it is really ice, right? Like because you're not like people will dump cool water on themselves or like try to put the cool shirt on, and like it's just warm 3 minutes later, like it's just warm and wet, and so ice really is helpful.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way about some of those sort of tactical sort of learnings, moving quickly through aid stations, how to really sort of prepare pacing plans and everything. It's to me, the longer you've been competing, the more that stuff kind of comes automatic, and you take for granted that you've been through all those things, whereas probably all of us learn each of those lessons the hard way at some point, right? So maybe that's a blessing of having had a few rounds before. Curious for each of you how goal setting has changed sort of as your career has progressed, because I'm not sure if you're able to sort of race less or more than before. But as you have achieved a lot, how does your goal setting process sort of work in terms of how your upcoming years?
I still get invitations to race all around the world, and I'm pretty bad at saying no. So I accept the race invitations. Like I'm actually, the marathon I ran was in a place called Messenia, which is on the west coast of Greece. And then a couple of days I'm running a 50K in Croatia, a Spartan Trail 50K. And then I'm coming back to run the Athens Marathon. It's the 40-year anniversary of the Athens Marathon, which kind of makes me laugh because, Athens is the birthplace of, I'm Greek, 100% Greek, and,
Sure,
the marathon started here 2,500 years ago, and they say the 40-year anniversary. I always kind of laugh at that. But, I wanted to do the Athens Marathon, and then I'm going back to San Francisco to do 100K, just because these are invites, and, I'm not going to win. I'm there to enjoy the race experience and, and try and still travel. And I still, thankfully my kids are older, Liza, so I've got that freedom, and I figured why not.
Okay, so still a little bit sort of unstructured, kind of whatever comes in the inbox. You see if you can sort of link a few of those together and to see where that takes you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still going to try to do like Western State. When I hit 70, I'm going to try to knock out a lot of races. I mean, there's, at 60, it seems like you're not that old anymore. You see people 74, 75 finishing 100 milers. So, that's when it's going to get interesting for me, is in the next decade.
Okay. And how about yourself, Liza? How do you structure your season?
Well, as far as like setting goals, to your first question, I think that because we just don't know what is possible for bodies in their 50s, 60s, and 70s in ultra running, because there have been so few people, that I've not changed my goals. Like, I'm still looking to PR in a flat 100, and it seems like, like the pace to do that is not that fast. And so while we do get slower as we age, like, we know that. I'm not running a 5K and expecting to PR, you know what I mean? Like, can I maintain, an 8:30 pace or a 7, or an 8-minute pace or whatever? Well, I mean, I can hold that pace. It's just, can I hold it that long? And it seems like, well, I've learned a lot. And so maybe that's possible. And so I think that we just don't know. And so I think all that, like, hey, you get slower as you age. Well, yes, obviously, right? Like, but I don't think we know exactly when that's going to happen. And I think that's the difficult part, because we just hear all the time, like, we get slower, we get slower, we get slower. And so then people just narrow what their goals are going to be. And so I think in part it's kind of fun to say, like, well, I'm not going to do that right now. And maybe that's useful to other folks to be like, well, I mean, she's not doing it. And, maybe I don't hit any of those goals, but maybe just like saying, like, we don't know, and so I'm going to try, brings more people into it. And there are going to be more and more older people, and hopefully, that there is more, thank you for doing this, right? Like, there is more attention to what's possible to do when your body is this old. And like I say, like, oh, I can't do a faster 5K or a faster marathon, but there are people a lot older than me that are running a ton faster than I am. And so it's like, well, is that possible? And so I think it's just like when you're swimming in, like, you can't all the time, or you're getting slower. It's just really hard not to, circumscribe your goals, right? And so it just kind of feels like, not going to do that yet. So.
No, and I really like the point about sort of not prematurely discounting yourself. Like that at TDS last year, Ludo Pomeroy, 47 years old, absolutely smashed the field. And it just shows that if someone's putting in the work, your body doesn't stop working just because you reach a certain number. There's just so many phenomenal athletes in the sport, and I think there's so many different types of races that could suit different different skill sets. It's not all just sort of one speed stuff. What about nutrition? As you've gotten older, and has your diet sort of maintained the same way? Do you have to be more careful about what you eat, just like you have to be more careful about getting your strength work. How has the food sort of situation changed?
Oh, yeah, I really try and make sure that I'm getting enough protein. It's just easy not to, and it just seems like with like perimenopause and menopause, that it's so easy to lose muscle at this point. And so you're just doing everything possible to hold on to the muscle you have and develop muscle. And so in addition to the strength training, just making sure like, am I actually getting 30 grams every meal, that kind of stuff. And so tracking it a little bit just to make sure, because I like, it's just easy for me not to.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, keeping muscle mass on is a challenge, and I work out a lot, cross train every day, but I've added more protein. Ironically, I've really cut down on carbs, so I've kind of doing somewhat of a keto diet, and I just find that gives me a lot of energy throughout the day. I'm trying to get in adequate calories, and a lot of that is coming from good quality fats, so olive oil, nuts, avocado. So I'm trying to up both my fat intake and my protein intake.
Just maybe finally, if there are older runners out there looking to set new PBs or maybe run at new distances, take on new challenges, get to peak performance. What lessons that we haven't yet covered would you want to share to someone like that?
I think that we need to reevaluate time cutoffs at races. I think that race directors need to look and see who's finishing their races. And if they don't have people in their 50s, 60s, and 70s finishing, then can they accommodate a couple more hours on their cutoff? Like if it's not a safety issue and it's not a permitting issue, then why not make it possible for people to compete? Like why people want to compete is the same as why they've always wanted to compete. And so why squash that? Like it just seems, and so there's that. I think too that to pressure races or ask kindly to races to put what those age group records are, because I think that for a lot of folks, that is exciting. Like if racing was the thing that was really fun, like the primary thing that was really fun about ultra running for you, and you're not going to podium anymore, like it is fun to look at those records and be like, oh well, there's something to shoot for. Like, and so why not just have that easily findable on your website and to reward it. I mean, like not with swag necessarily. Like I feel like, yeah, at a certain point you're like, I'm good with t-shirts and, stuff. But like, hey, this person did this, to give attention to that, because the more attention you give, the more people are going to come. And then financially for races, like, don't you want people with money coming to buy, to enter your race?
Yeah, no, I think those are great tips for race directors there. And I think that point about age categories and more awareness and promotion of those, it would also just make the race more interesting at different parts of it. It's not just, the pointy end that has all the interesting stuff going on. There's a lot of talented athletes through the field and potentially some pretty interesting stories about performances.
Yeah, that's my plug. Pressure kindly race directors.
And how about yourself, Gina? Any tips for maybe athletes, just in terms of wanting to hit peak performance at a later stage of their careers?
Yeah, I mean, I think you need to. I want to first agree wholeheartedly with Liza's sentiment that races need to get more liberal with their cutoffs if they want to attract a wider range of folks. I did a race a few years ago in Australia. It was called the Blackall 100K, and it was a 24-hour cutoff for the 100K. And it wasn't a super technical, or there wasn't a lot of elevation. It wasn't flat, but there wasn't a lot of elevation gain or loss. And there was a 50K with a 23-hour cutoff. And a lot of the folks were in their 50s, 60s, 70s that just hiked it as groups of people. And it was really nice to be, on the trail with, people that are still doing the race, and they're just kind of fast hiking it. And it brings in a completely another element. I think race directors should also, along with the podium finishers of, both overall and age categories, there should be a prize for the oldest finisher and the youngest finisher, just to recognize them. I think ultra running is, it's an inclusive sport, and I think that would make it more inclusive. As far as training as you get older, some of the points I hit earlier, increase the intensity and back off on the volume. Check out things like the elliptigo or your cross training on a bike, just to take some of the load off your joints, but still get the cardio. And evaluate your diet. All of those things. And it's frustrating not to be able to to push the way you used to push, but also just to appreciate the fact that you're still going. For me, it's all about longevity. It's about still running these races as I get older. It's not about getting on the podium or winning anymore. It's just about staying the course and doing this until I'm in a pine box. I always tell people my finish line's a pine box.
Yeah. Can I tell a quick Dean story?
Oh no.
Go for it.
So I was crewing at Badwater. It was the first time I'd been out there, and my friend was having just a terrible, terrible time. And at one point, he was just crawling around on all fours, like trying to vomit, and it was quite a scene. And so we were all kind of tending to him and watching him do this, and all of a sudden, like, this crew pulls in, and it's like a pit crew at a racetrack, and all of a sudden it's like, that's Dean's crew. Dean's coming in, and I was just mortified because my friend was crawling around on the ground making these retching noises, and I was like, well, this is just embarrassing. But it didn't matter because you didn't see us, because you were in and out so fast because your crew took such good care of you that you were gone, and then we were just left alone in the dark with this poor fellow who finished and did an amazing, exceptional job. But that's my.
I was going to ask about your friend.
Yeah, no, he finished. It was okay.
Still on the ground.
No, he did really, really well. He rallied. It was all good. But that was what I was just like, so embarrassed.
Liza, tell your friend that I've been there as well. So no shame at all. I've been on the ground retching myself, so no problem.
Maybe on that spot, actually.
There's potential. There's potential. And then can I do one more little plug, Jeff?
Yeah, go for it.
Because we're all here.
Yeah.
So I'm involved with this nonprofit called Band of Runners, and we bring military veterans into the trail running community, and we put on an annual trail running camp, and it's entirely free to military veterans, and we bring in coaches and ultrarunners from all over the place to mentor and teach them the ins and outs of trail running. And so if you are a military veteran, or you know somebody who might appreciate being a member of this community, who maybe is at loose ends and could use kind of what ultra running and the trail running community has to offer, then bandofrunners.org. You should go there.
Okay, so the website is the best place to check that out.
Yep. Thanks.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Thanks for sharing. And Dean, any projects or interesting things that you want to share in terms of sort of upcoming adventures or things that's keeping you busy, maybe even outside of the racing?
Yeah, I mean, I've always got this, stretch goal, a BHAG, it's called, like a big, hairy, audacious goal. So I've been working with another ultramarathoner, a guy by the name of Charlie Engel, and we're trying to get all the passports and permits and permission to run from the lowest point on Earth to the highest point on Earth. So most people know the highest point on Earth is Mount Everest. The lowest point is the Dead Sea in Jordan. And
difficult right now.
Yeah. It's tricky because there's only a short window to climb Everest, so you've got to arrive at a certain time, and
that's right.
Yeah, trying to get through Iraq and Iran at this time with the State Department is just they're having none of it. So we'd have to take a more northern route, which is through Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, which it almost doubles the length of the journey. So who knows? We're trying for 2024, and we'll see how it goes. The end of 2024, December, yeah.
How long would your are you estimating that might take?
Well, the shorter route through Iraq and Iran would be about 2,800 miles. And I ran across the U.S., which was about 3,100 miles in 75 days. The longer route would probably be more like 7 or 8 months to do it, and so that's where it's at right now. And we're trying to come up with all kinds of workarounds to bypass Iraq and Iran. And one is I know this sounds crazy, but to paddle across the Indian Ocean. So we'd spend 2 weeks in a 2-man, rowboat paddling, and then show up, wash ashore in India, and then run to Tibet.
Sure. I like how that's the safe route. Is rowing across the ocean in a canoe. No, but that's sounds like a once in a lifetime adventure. So good luck with the permitting. But just if that happens, I think a lot of people will be following.
You two are crewing. I didn't tell you. You two are crewing for me. So.
Oh, is that right?
Liza, you can bring your kids. Yeah. We'll all
Oh, sweet.
I could probably put in a couple of patches for that. Sure. All right. Well, listen. Thanks to both of you for joining. It was really nice, interesting chat. I want to thank all the people who helped bring the podcast together at ITRA, including our talented producer and editor Sam Hill at Hill Adventures. You can find all the ITRA Trail Talks episodes on the ITRA YouTube channel and Spotify, and you can learn more about ITRA at the ITRA website, itra.run. So that's it for us this week, and happy trails, everyone. Thank you.